I chose the Daleks Master Plan because out of all the stories which have not yet been reconstructed, it was basically the one I wanted to see the most. Those early episodes on Kemble are really atmospheric and I think quintessential Doctor Who. You just get thrown straight into this quite dark story. And I think having it set out of space in other planets and things from an animation point of view, it just opened up a lot more possibilities than, say, some of the Earthbound stories would have done. So I was quite keen to have a stab at some of that.
Today, I'm sitting down with Timepiece Animation, who has been animating the Daleks Master Plan in a way that honours the original, whilst giving it an extra polish.
When I start an animation, I look at the camera script so that I can get a feel of what was planned in the studio. Look at any telesnaps or on-set pictures and clips if there's any available. I've obviously got the audio files, but I'll look at the novelisation too, just to see if there was some character motivation or intent beyond just the dialogue. So hopefully by the end of that, I'm fairly steeped in the original. Whilst Douglas Camfield was an exceptionally talented director, he did have the advantage of pointing his camera at great actors performing his beloved characters, with all the benefit of the unscripted business that performers can do when the camera's pointing at them. There's little gestures and all of which, enriches the visual. I don't have this, unfortunately. I'm essentially trying to create the illusion of life with a lot of pixels. So I have to utilise the camera and to a degree the sets and the environments to work in tandem with the character animation in a way that hopefully creates that illusion of life in as convincing a way as possible. And therefore it's not really practical to try and follow the original shot patterns, etc. verbatim. But I do try as much as possible to honour the style. I'll therefore avoid camera work that conspicuously feels too modern or simply would not really have been possible with the resources that they had at the time. I guess I would describe it as what would Douglas Camfield have done if he had been shooting at Ealing on film and been allowed to do a second take if needed.
Due to copyright limitations, Timepiece has presented these episodes in a cut-down format in order that audiences can watch without having to do any tricky audio syncing work.
I wanted to make sure that each piece is a satisfying experience for the viewer on its own, and isolated clips just wouldn't be that, no matter how nicely they were presented. Therefore, my approach has been to try and find the segment which I feel is the main focus of that episode, and then, if necessary, top and tail it with another scene if it helps to provide more context. I try to keep those edits to a minimum so that you are, as much as possible, getting an unfiltered version of the original scene. So far, the biggest edit has been The Nightmare Begins. In this episode, there was a scene in which the Doctor interrogates Brett in the TARDIS, and while this is a very important scene in the story, it wasn't necessary for this presentation. And I felt it would be a lot more fun to end the instalment with the Doctor and obviously the audience discovering the Daleks. It just felt a lot more impactful and was a cheeky nod to the Terry Nation cliffhangers where the Doctor confronts the Daleks at the end of an episode. It was just more fun.
The approach in reconstructing Lost Doctor Who has always left fans feeling divided. Should it be as accurate to the original, presented in 4:3 black and white, or in 16:9 colour to appeal to a wider audience?
I've taken the decision to present the reconstructions in both 16:9 colour and 4:3 black and white. There are different renders and slightly different cameras designed so they're not just the same with a filter over the top. There are differences there. I did experiment with doing certain shots in black and white in a way that would evoke the original even more. So for instance, when the TARDIS lands in Volcano, I didn't use it in the one on YouTube, but I did a test where I made the TARDIS landing look slightly more like a model shot. If this was an official release for Blu-ray or whatever, I think I would probably push quite hard to present those two different versions and give people a proper choice, as it were.
Although animation can seem fun, it also leads to a lot of challenges.
The most challenging part of the process is almost always dealing with something that's very unshowy, that nobody's going to take any notice of, but is technically quite complicated and can take a very long time to get right. I've lost whole weekends and nights of sleep just trying to get characters to hand over items or close drawers or stick their hands in their pockets, do whatever it is. It's usually something small and seemingly unimportant, but until you get it right, you don't have a scene, and that can be quite painful. I should also say that I tend to render scenes as I go. As the scenes become more complicated or more ambitious, then the renders themselves take longer, and then you can feel like you're wading through treacle sometimes, and yeah, that can be a bit disheartening, but you get there in the end. The most rewarding part, as with just about any creative project, is getting to see what you imagined in your head playing out in front of you on the screen. As I said, it can be quite a slow and painful process, particularly if you're doing a lot of renders. But when you finally see it, it's enormously gratifying and actually quite addictive in a way.
One of the joys of Timepiece Animations is seeing how well Hartnell's movements have been recreated.
Well, Hartnell has proven to be an absolute gift for animation. His body language has been great fun to replicate, and it's been really nice to see so many people picking up on that and commenting on YouTube. I was actually inspired by an anecdote from Peter Purves, in which Hartnell, after recording one day, took him to one side and gently reminded him that television was a very small medium. And once you've heard that story, you can kind of see Hartnell deliberately keeping his hand gestures close to his face to stay within that frame when he's performing as the Doctor. I actually came away with a whole new appreciation for him. He was a very skilled performer, and he created a character that, as fans, we can essentially identify just through the body language alone. And I should also add that I do think Peter Purves himself was a great actor. I think it's a real shame that beyond Doctor Who, we didn't get to see more of his acting.
I think the biggest question from viewers is, does Timepiece have plans to animate the entire serial?
It would be absolutely wonderful to complete the Daleks Master Plan, but I would only do this at the BBC's request. At present, I have done a significant chunk, and that will hopefully find its way onto YouTube in the coming months. And if you consider that a lot of the necessary assets now exist, and that the process is established and it's working well, then it has never been more possible to complete the story than it is now.
But Timepiece Animations are not stuck purely in the 1960s. He has also created a rather ambitious animation of the Sixth Doctor audio adventure, The Maltese Penguin.
Back in the 80s, Golden Wonder Crisps were giving away mini comics featuring the Sixth Doctor and Frobisher. I collected these, and for years I wanted somebody somewhere to make a cartoon series featuring the characters. I thought it would be the best thing ever. Well, sadly it wasn't to be. And then many years later, I'd actually drifted from Doctor Who. I hadn't really been aware of Big Finish's work until the 2005 revival. And then I stumbled on their work and discovered, to my delight, that they had done a couple of plays with Frobisher. When I listened to the Maltese Penguin in particular, it reminded me so much of the Shapeshifter, which is his first comic, that I just thought, surely it's only a matter of time before somebody does something with this and somebody animates it. And then eventually I thought, well, I'll be a bit annoyed if somebody else does it. I want to do it. And that's how I came to do it. Interestingly, while I was making the film, I was looking for reference material one night and discovered that there was an auction site selling what was page 1 of the Shapeshifter inks. So I decided to buy that, and I now have Frobisher's very first appearance framed on my wall.
Attempting a feature-length animation was an incredibly ambitious task.
It's very hard to determine exactly how long these things took, as I was constantly revising them as I went along. Same goes for the characters as well. At the end of the animation process, I was still not entirely satisfied with some of the designs, so I spent a month improving them, and then unfortunately had to go back and re-render all the scenes with those characters in. In fact, some of the earlier scenes to be finished were completely redone at the end of the process because I felt the overall standard had improved so much and I needed to level it out, really. The very first shot I did was actually the opening shot, which had to cover Frobisher's introductory dialogue. I started with it because there was no character animation needed, but it was a lot of world building in every sense, and it helped define the look for the rest of the film. The initial pass for that took almost a week to render, and then it went through several more iterations to get the one that you see in the final film.
Throughout the animation, there are Easter eggs referencing almost the entirety of Doctor Who. Keep an eye out for them in these following clips.
The Easter eggs were a lot of fun, almost too much fun actually, as they turned out to be quite time consuming sometimes. I actually have two favourites. The first is the newspaper, which Frobisher is reading in the street. It's well worth pausing on. One of the headlines says, "Man animates radio play, why?" And the other is later on in the film, Frobisher is swimming underwater and he passes a film canister labelled Fury from the Deep. It had to be done.
Timepiece's approach to animating Big Finish compared to 1960s Doctor Who was completely different.
For me, the appeal of animating a Big Finish is that I'm a lot freer in my visual choices because I'm not trying to evoke the style of 1960s Doctor Who, and this is reflected in the scale of the sets, the choice of lenses, and the camera work itself. So it's certainly much more in keeping with my own directing style, for want of a better way of putting it. The missing episodes were at least intended to be visual pieces with time allocated to movement, whilst Big Finish obviously wasn't. So when doing a Big Finish, I'm therefore having to find ways to open up the audio so that characters have time to move and you can spend some time on establishing shots and so on and so forth. Almost every time I listen to a Big Finish, I start to think about how I would animate it. But right now, I certainly wouldn't do another one in its entirety, unless they asked me to. In which case, I have narrowed it down to 3.
Timepiece has preferred to keep those 3 choices a secret. So Big Finish, if you're listening, this might be the chance to get the license to create animations. But he does share with us one of his dream projects.
Without a doubt, my dream Doctor Who animation project would be an adaptation of the 6th Doctor comic book series by Steve Parkhouse and John Ridgway. This is the era which introduced Frobisher, also known as the Talking Penguin, and it just feels so right for animation, particularly the Voyager story arc involving Astrolabus, who's a particularly mysterious, quite powerful foe who's manipulating things in the wings. I also think that the story by default just has some really striking visuals there that would be fantastic to animate.
So, what future projects does Timepiece Animation have in store for us?
I haven't decided yet, but there's certainly some more master plan to come, and I'm also quite keen to address some of the suggestions that have been made in the YouTube comments, so watch this space. So these animations are available on the Timepiece YouTube channel. If you enjoy them, please consider subscribing, as it does help other people to find the content. These are of course unofficial animations, so there is no chance that they will become available commercially. That said, if people are enjoying the style of the work, please do spread the word. People were quite vocal when they did not like the Web of Fear animation, and that seems to have had an impact on how the official releases have been approached since then. So it may be, if the rights holders are aware of the positive response to these animations, it might impact on their approach to future releases.
If you like what you've seen, go subscribe to the Timepiece Animation YouTube channel and share his work around so people can see it. I really hope one day he gets an opportunity to work on an official animation, and I hope the BBC are once again looking towards these fan creators in order to involve them in these official releases, in the same way they utilise Rob Ritchie, who's an incredible animator. And thank you to Timepiece Animation for agreeing to appear on my channel. Don't forget to click below to subscribe to the official Josh Snares YouTube channel.